Well, hello again, guys, from here at Whitley Park. We have just been speaking to Eddie Howe inside the building, and he's just left. And he's now training with his players behind the trees there. Now, in terms of press conferences, that was all fairly football-y. And by that I mean, there was no talk of contracts, no talk of internal tension. Yeah, we talked about the ball for once, and it was fairly, you would say, in terms of headlines, low key, and that's probably just the way Eddie Howe likes it. That's what normally happens on the back of a good performance in a win like there was on Wednesday night. But what we really got into, and the subject I really pushed him on, was the midfield and how that will then look going forward, given we saw Sandro Tonali really excel and really thrive and seem to be inspired by that extra responsibility from playing in the sixth role against Chelsea. Bruno Guimaraes will come back into the team. Of course he will. I'll tell you what Eddie said about that in the hint he gave as to selection for tomorrow and going forward, because the question I want to ask today and what I'm going to explore is, what team does Eddie Howe pick tomorrow and what team would I pick? Now, first of all, what do I think Eddie will do? And we'll get to midfield because that is the big debating point. Now, he did say that it's a very big ask to ask players to go 3 times in 6 days. And there are 5 players who would fall into that category: Lewis Hall, Fabian Schär, Joelinton, Sandro Tonali and Alexander Isak. Now, on the fitness, Isak, of course, came off after 63 minutes the other night. He seems like he should be okay. Eddie said he will assess Isak and Anthony Gordon today. When Eddie says that, it usually means everything is fine, and I haven't had any information coming to me that there's any big major injury shocks or concerns. Now, one thing that perhaps might not be a shock to you guys, but the news I broke last week, Callum Wilson will miss the 3 games this week. Eddie Howe said it's probably best now that they leave him until after the international break. I've had the same information on Kieran Trippier as well, so we shouldn't expect to see them even down at Nottingham Forest next weekend. But that's for next weekend. For now, there's this absolutely huge one against Arsenal tomorrow lunchtime. And what does Eddie do? Okay, Nick Pope, he picks himself. I think at right back, what do? Emil Kraft was fantastic the other night, and we've just joked with Eddie in there about the Krafu nickname, and he said that's actually what they call him internally as well. So does Krafu keep his place? Sadly not. I think Tino Livramento will come back in there. He was good down at Chelsea. Yes, he was completely turned inside and out by Cole Palmer's wonderful ball for Chelsea's opening goal, but even the real, the original Cafu would have found problems with that. So I think Tino Livramento will come back in. The centre-halves, Fabian Schär will keep his place. Lloyd Kelly is going to be really unfortunate, but he probably will drop out. And I think that is because we've seen the set-piece threat of Arsenal this season. Wow, we talk about Newcastle's difficulties with set pieces, and I think it's now almost 60 corners without a goal. Arsenal are scoring with 1 in 6, it seems, at the moment. So Dan Burn, I think, and I think this is what Eddie will do, he will come back in for that height and that aerial threat. And at left back, well, Lewis Hall is one of those players who is being asked to go for the 3rd time in 6 days, but he's 20-year-old, and given that every game he plays now, he gets better and better, keep him in. That one's a no-brainer. Into midfield. Okay, midfield. What's Eddie going to do? And this was the question I asked of him 2 in a row about Tonali and Bruno. Can Tonali play 6 with Bruno to the right of him in an 8? And my reasoning was, we saw Bruno when he first came to the club, that player who was playing in a more advanced role. Who can forget the diving header against Leicester, the little chip against Norwich, when he was populating those areas in the box? I said, can he do that? Eddie said, well, yes, he can. But, and this was crucially, this for me was the telltale sign. He said, Bruno is a player who likes to come to the ball, who wants to be on the ball, who gravitates towards it. Sometimes when you play in the 8, be that to the left or right of the 6, you are asking your player to move away from the ball. That for me tells you that Bruno is going to come back in the number 6 position. Now, when we explored the subject of Sandro Tonali, and I put it to him that, I used that phrase with Eddie, he seemed to thrive for the responsibility in that more central role. And he said, yes, he was very good. He said he didn't think he was as involved in Newcastle's build-up as much, but there was a real defensive discipline there in terms of populating spaces, which made Newcastle more solid in the 6. And I think that is true. But everything he said hinted towards Tonali going back to that 8 role. Now, would he be one of those players, given he falls among that 5? Would he take him out? I think it would be a hell of a big call not to play Sandro Tonali, given for me, he's just given his best performance of the season by far on Wednesday night, and he should, in Italy International, the calibre of player, AC Milan, Champions League, this is the sort of game, live on telly, kicking off the Premier League weekend against Arsenal, where Sandro Tonali will absolutely want to play, and for me, needs to play. And I think Eddie will go with that. So we've got Tonali on the right, I think Bruno comes back in the middle. This is Eddie's selection on the left of the midfields. Now, does he bring Joelinton back in? I think Eddie played Joelinton wide left on Wednesday night, almost as an experiment. It wasn't working in the middle of midfield on that left. You know, his form this season, bar the opening game, has been poor for me, given we know the levels he's hit previously. He played him on the left as an experiment, was the word I used on Wednesday night, with a number of these positions and selections. Well, the experiment worked. I think Eddie will keep Joelinton wide left, and that leaves the question, who does he play on the left-hand side of the midfield? Is it Sean Longstaff? Is it Joe Willock? Given the combination and the success of it and the history of it between Joelinton and Willock, I think he'll give Willock a go from the start, even though against Fulham, the last time he put him in from the start in the Premier League, he blew up after, I was going to say 45 minutes. It was long before that. He came off at half-time. So, yeah, I think he'll give that a go, especially Willock against his former club, and just taking that momentum from what was a fabulous performance on Wednesday night. Alexander Isak through the middle. Again, we're trying to read the telltale signs of Eddie's fitness updates. Isak should be okay, and he's another one who will be asked to go again for a third game in a week because there are no other options, if we're being honest. On the right, well, I've left Anthony Gordon. He's the only player left who can play there now, so I think Gordon will go again. And that was another question asked of Eddie this morning. Is Anthony Gordon okay playing there? And I think there is an acceptance that Gordon, of course, would prefer to be down the left. But on the right, on Wednesday night, I thought he did okay. He got into good positions. He set the tone for the entire performance, and Eddie referenced that there himself as well with that sliding tackle inside 30 seconds. So I think Gordon, in Eddie's mind, in Eddie's team, he'll go again on the right-hand side of midfield. And there you go, Eddie, I've picked a team for you. But what would I do? Well, this is going to be brief because I would go with what I think Eddie will do, but I would make one tweak. I would switch Bruno and Tonali. And I go back to Bruno's impact. When Newcastle signed him from Lyon, there was very much the acceptance in the stand, and he was coming in as a six, the sort of player, the position we've seen him play this season. But he came in and he scored goals. He was mobile. He was up and down. He was a threat. He had assists. He was this superhero almost. You know, my favourite Newcastle goal of recent years, that diving header against Leicester in the last minute was just absolute picture book. It was brilliant. I want to see that Bruno again. And when he plays in the six, I don't think he's playing badly at the moment. I think his form has certainly picked up. But just give him something different to think about. I thought Tonali seemed inspired by having something different to think about the other night. And given Newcastle have had real issues with that sixth position in terms of the opposition number 10 or the wingers just sort of drifting in field and existing in that area between the midfield and the defence and exploiting that space. If Eddie thinks Tonali showed real defensive discipline and that domain the other night, keep him there, because that for me has been a huge weakness. So yeah, there you go, guys. That would be my 11, the same personnel as Eddie Howe, but I would make that slight positional tweak in the midfield. Now, we've picked the team. How is that team going to fare against Arsenal? Now, before the game on Wednesday, and I said this on this channel, and I said it to anyone I would meet, I was convinced Newcastle would win. You know, we've seen this movie before when they really need a result, and when that crowd and when those players really need to step up, and for me, the season was potentially on the line. That might sound ridiculous saying that as early as October, but I did have that feeling. Now, everyone responded to that. But as part of this little trilogy, my prediction went, I thought they'd win on Wednesday. That has played out. I thought then, and I was saying this at the time, that they'd come into Arsenal on the back of that and there'd be a really spiky, brilliant, entertaining draw, where again that momentum then carries over, and then they'll probably go and lose down at Nottingham Forest. I hope that doesn't sound too negative, but just the way this season has gone and the way this club is, it's slightly tongue-in-cheek when I say that, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if that is how it plays out. Listen, we'll park Forest and leave that for another day. But in terms of tomorrow against Arsenal, I don't think Newcastle will lose. And if you're going to push me for a result, I think they'll go there and they'll get a draw. They might even win it. I just think all of that feel good, and there was a real emotion of almost relief afterwards that, okay, the season's still there, these players can still perform. There's been a couple of really enlightening tweaks that I think gave everyone optimism and hope going forward, that keep the players in those positions, keep Tonali in the middle. You know, that might just be the key to unlocking this season and rediscovering the levels of which we know they are capable and should be capable. And for me, Arsenal, again, on the back of Chelsea, is just the sort of game they need. Another huge one for which they'll rally themselves. I think the crowd will be up for it as well. It's one of those early kickoffs, but with that, okay, you can't get as many beers into you before the game, but there's promise of a fair few more afterwards. I think it'll be a really good mood and a good vibe inside the ground on Saturday. So I'm not going to upgrade my prediction. I'm not going to go for Newcastle win, but I will commit to they won't get beat. Tell me what you think, guys, below the line. Tell me the team that you would pick. What would you do in that midfield? I think it's fascinating because as I've explored so often this season and last season and probably the season before that as well, the midfield has been a real issue for them and a point of strength at times, but also a point of weakness and one that has been played on by the opposition. Tell me your thoughts. So yeah, it doesn't stop at the moment. There's loads of videos, loads of content, something I am going to post below the line, the link to. I've written a big feature for Mail Plus in tomorrow's Daily Mail about why I think it's time to leave St James's Park and why Newcastle United needs a new super stadium. It's a big read in there, a lot of emotion, a lot of memory, a lot of research has gone into that. So yeah, please click on it. It's worth a whole other video one day. I'm going to grab the selfie stick and walk around St James's and explore that subject. But for now, click and read on the article to learn my thoughts and my argument and my reasoning. But for now, thank you very much for watching this video. I'll be back tomorrow from those terraces of St James's, reflecting on what will not be, I'm convinced, a Newcastle United defeat. So please hit like, that subscribe button, thanks is there as well. And I'll see you again in 24 hours time. Okay, take care guys, bye-bye.